Hi everybody, and welcome to a special episode of Heel Heat. This is our sub show called Under the Radar. I'm George Coles. This is my tag team partner Mustafa,
Gary Rhodes.
and we've done this before one time with Beautiful Bobby. And basically the concept is we're taking a wrestler that's not talked about much and doesn't seem to get the respect that we think they should.
Either as talkers or workers or mixture of both.
And this week we've decided to go with Perry Saturn. Now, before Perry was a wrestler, he started off, his first job, he was an Army Ranger for 4 years, and he started at the age of 17 going into the Rangers, which is pretty impressive. Army Rangers are a pretty elite force in the armed forces.
Well, they were legit tough guys, and then when he got into training for wrestling, he was trained by Killer Kowalski, which was another tough guy in the ring in the wrestling business. He trained the likes of like Triple H, China, even Kenny Dillon.
Kenny Dillon?
Whatever his name is. I mean, it doesn't matter.
Anyway, he got trained by Kowalski. After that, he happened to find John Cronus, who he had formed the Eliminators with in a bar, and liked his look, brought him down, got him trained as well, and then they became the tag team. They started off as a tag team in USWA, which was Jerry Lawler's federation based out of Memphis at the time. And basically at the time, it was the WWE Developmental without being called the WWE Developmental. At the time, WWE didn't have money to fund Developmental. It funded on its own.
Yeah, so with the likes of guys that got trained down there, you talk about one of the most famous guys of all, The Rock.
Well, you had guys like Rock, Kane, the Headbangers, the Gangsters.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, a bunch of guys came out of there. D'Lo Brown.
Believe it or not, the Gangsters could actually wrestle back in the day.
And even now they can. They're just...
Well, no, they've gotten so set in their ways.
So set in the gimmick. But, after they were there for a little while, they won the tag title once there, had a nice little run. Then they went on to ECW, where they found their first hit of real big fame. At the time, they came in right as ECW was starting to break mainstream.
They came in and they did a job for the Steiner brothers, but Paul Lee liked them so much, he hired them.
And he kept them around and built at the time. They're still one of the top 2 or 3 tag teams of all time in the histories of ECW. And I'm talking about the real ECW, not the WWE watered down bullshit. Other than the Public Enemy and the Dudleys, they're the number 3 tag team in the history of ECW. They won the tag title 3 times there. And at the time they were there, they wrestled against the Public Enemy, the Gangsters, the Pitbulls,
Triple Threat,
the Dudleys. I mean, everybody that was anybody in ECW they wrestled with. And, even they brought in, at the time, Steve Dr. Death Williams and Terry Gordy, who were wrestling in Japan and were the biggest team in Japan and were a monster tag team over there.
Oh, yeah.
They brought them in to wrestle the Eliminators in ECW, and the Eliminators ended up going over. So that tells you how much, at the time, Paul Heyman thought of these guys to put them over on the biggest tag team in Japan.
Of course. They were great workers, and a lot, like you were saying earlier, a lot of their moves were just so crisp.
Yeah. A lot of people, I've heard the arguments from people in the past that they were too choreographed. To me, I kind of liked it. Other than a team like the Rockers, they were another team in that similar mold where a lot of their moves, they were set moves, but they hit them so perfectly that it didn't bother you. You didn't notice. It's not like John Cena where you're like, okay, it's 2 minutes into the match, he's going to do the shoulder block.
Exactly.
You knew what was coming. You knew that they were going to do the total elimination, the double kicks, everything. You knew was that they were going to hit, but still, it was still interesting.
Well, and the thing is, Saturn could pull out spot wrestling too. Yeah. He could. I remember the match he did, and the steel cage match he did against the Gangsters, where he just kept dropping elbows from the top of the cage, and every time looked as good as the first. I mean, they were perfect every time he hit them.
He was just flying all over the place. And then the other match, the scaffold match, I think it was against Doc and Gordy that the scaffold was set up for Brian Lee and Tommy Dreamer, but Saturn eventually climbed on the scaffold and dropped an elbow from the top of the scaffold. And that's what actually got him noticed by Terry Taylor in WCW. He seen a tape of that match and decided, I'm going to bring Saturn in. And then he brought Saturn in there. Saturn got injured, but when he came back from the injury, he joined Raven's Flock, which we've talked about in the past. We think that the Flock as a whole were very much
they're misused.
And misbooked. They could have been something that went right up against the NWO and stood its ground.
Well, that's where egos came in. I honestly think if those guys would have had the egos they did and would have feuded with the Flock instead of just WCW, have the Flock stand on their own against both.
Yeah.
I think it would have worked out perfect.
And that was the thing at the time. Too many egos were pushing down too many talented guys. You had guys like Raven and Saturn in the Flock, Kidman, who was really good at the time. Lodi was a decent worker, whether, he got...
Hammer was a decent worker, too.
Yeah.
Hammer didn't get a lot of respect he deserved. He was there for 6-7 years. And
Horace was a good brawler. He wasn't the best worker, but he was a good...
I think he was a better worker than his uncle.
Everybody's a better worker than his uncle.
Cue the pyro. But honestly, I really did like the Flock. I thought it was good. He worked good as Raven's right hand.
He was basically the Arn Anderson role of the group. Raven was the unquestioned leader, and it was set up just like the Horsemen. You had to go through Saturn to get to Raven. Mm-hmm. Just like the Horsemen, you had to go through Arn to get to Flair. And he did the gimmick well until there was dissension in the Flock, and it ended up being Saturn versus Raven. If Saturn wins, the Flock disbands. If Raven wins, Saturn has to be basically his servant for the rest of the time he's a wrestler. And Saturn ended up winning with help from Billy Kidman, who at the time they broke off, and he went on to do good things as a cruiserweight champion there. Looked like at the time he was going to be a really big star.
Yeah, they put a lot into Billy Kidman towards the end of WCW.
Yeah. And for whatever reason it didn't ever pan out as great as it should have, but he did at the time. He had the look, he had a good gimmick, the crowd was getting into him.
Great moveset.
Yeah. Had to hit the shooting star press really good. At that time they called it the 7-year edge because they were...
Because he'd get up and start itching right after he hit it and stuff.
Well, they were running with him, basically it was an unsaid he was a heroin addict gimmick. They never said he was, and basically it fit in with the Flock. They all had somewhat drug addict.
Did you ever see Kidman before he wrestled with the Flock, when he dressed in? He had those boots that had the high...
the kick pads.
Yeah, well, no, on the bottom of them, they made him look so much taller.
Oh, yeah,
actually had like heels.
elevators.
Yeah, he had the elevators on. I was like, man.
Yeah, I remember that. He wore like day glow colored because he used to wrestle on Saturday Night, the WCW Saturday Night show as a jobber before the Flock happened. Which really, basically, all they did was say, here's a bunch of jobbers we're doing nothing with.
And the thing is, like I said, there was so much potential, especially with Raven and Perry Saturn. Those two there, they could have built a company around him if they really would have,
Then after he broke out of the Flock, he went on his own, was pretty successful. He had a WCW TV title run, beat Disco Inferno for it, and then eventually lost it back to Disco. But then after that, he had a decent, I thought his feud with Y2J, Chris Jericho, was awesome back then.
It brought them both out because they were both just locked. Jericho was locked, he was stuck with the cruiserweights. And that, gave someone for Saturn to really open up with, and they worked great together.
Which led to the infamous the dress match where loser has to wear a dress, and Perry Saturn ends up losing the match because of the crooked referee, and ends up wearing the dress, which they turned it into a Marilyn Manson type gimmick. Basically, he came out to the knockoff Marilyn Manson song.
He had to wear the dress for 90 days, and then
he just kept wearing it.
Yeah, well, then he had the dog collar match as a rematch against Jericho, and he won that.
And that's when he basically dropped the dress gimmick and went back to wearing just the jeans and boots like he was wearing before. And then after that, they went into the Revolution, which was it was right when Vince Russo came in. He put him, Benoit, Malenko, and Shane Douglas in a faction together.
So it's pretty much triple threat plus one.
Yeah, the triple threat plus Perry Saturn, which was pretty decent at the time. WCW was rudderless, so gimmicks were being built and dropped within weeks of each other.
And the thing is, with that gimmick, if they had the right writers, they could have made something out of that.
Well, yeah, I mean, they were getting over with. They had Shane as the mouthpiece. You had 3 excellent wrestlers. Well, Shane's an excellent wrestler too. 4 guys that could really go in the ring, and 4 guys that you built. 3 of them at least you built as legitimate badasses in your company. With Shane being one hell of a talker, and he took up for, because basically at that point Benoit and Malenko weren't great talkers. Saturn didn't get to the point. He didn't really get a chance to talk in WCW much.
No, he didn't.
And when he did, it was short little one-liners.
But every time he did something, it was kind of either funny or, he made his point whenever he spoke.
He did have the best thing I've ever seen on Thursday Night Thunder. It was him and Raven doing an interview, and Raven's talking. He goes, "Remember that time I stole the girl from you back in summer camp?" And Saturn looks at Raven and goes, "No, Raven, that was Tommy." To me, I was laughing my ass off. No one in the crowd got it because it was an ECW reference. No one knew who Tommy Dreamer was at the show, but it was one of those inside jokes that, to me, as a fan, I loved it. It was great.
I always like the inside ribs.
Yeah, it was great to me. And, both of them are probably really good friends with Tommy.
Oh, yeah. I mean, they traveled up and down the roads forever with him, so, yeah.
And then after that, the Revolution kind of was teetering out. You had at some point, Kevin Sullivan says to everyone in the back, he says, "If you want to leave your contract, go now."
Well, Sullivan, of course, wasn't fans of Benoit.
No, because he stole a woman.
Exactly. And, Saturn, Guerrero, Malenko, and Benoit were all tight, so they all just jumped ship.
Well, the thing of it was, none of them really were getting pushed.
Oh, they weren't. I mean, they were giving Benoit the world title, but at that time, it was a sinking ship. They all knew what to do. And, then you had guys like Mike Graham, didn't like him because he was friends with Sullivan, so they weren't getting booked right, so they knew they were kind of screwed if they would have stayed there, so they went to WWE with a 3-year contract.
Well, the thing of it was that Sullivan gave Benoit the title to try and entice him to stay, but it didn't end up working. He got in, and basically they disbanded that title that day, and then they jumped ship, and one of the big things in the Monday Night War was the Radicals showing up on WWE. Saturn, Benoit, Malenko, and Guerrero. That was, at the time, it was revolutionary because you had these 4 guys that were big chunks of WCW programming. Now we're showing up sitting ringside at WWE.
And the thing is, if he had them 4 there, then Jericho left months before.
Yeah.
So
Raven left at the same time.
Yeah, exactly. So
and Shane left too, but Shane never.
No, he went back to ECW.
Yeah, he went back to ECW and then XPW.
Yeah. So I mean, really, they really screwed themselves when they lost all that talent at one time. They shot their mouths off, and you've seen what happened.
And basically, it was towards the end of WCW. It was a sinking ship at that time anyway. So, good thing that they jumped off the Titanic before it was over. Then you had after the Radicals, which had a little bit of a run. Basically, the Radicals were just brought in to bring these 4 guys in. Then they had a little run. After that, he went into the hardcore division, kind of tooled around in there for a little while. Then he was put with Terry as his manager for a bit, and that's when the big change happened. In a match, he was wrestling a guy named Mike Bell, who was a jobber at the time. Mike Bell, there was a move, I think it was a suplex. He flubbed the suplex and landed Saturn on his head and pissed him off.
Oh, you could see how pissed off Saturn was. I mean, he was pissed off after the match.
Yeah. And he just started kicking and punching him and legitimately dumped him over the ropes onto his head and then stiffed him the whole rest of the match. The reason I bring this up is because as a punishment for Saturn doing that, they gave him the moppy gimmick.
And the moppy gimmick worked for me. I thought it was pretty entertaining.
Which brought out Saturn as a goofy character, but he got it over really well. And it was another gimmick like Chavo and Pepe the Horse and Al Snow and Head. It was a goofy-ass gimmick, but he found a way to get it over. He added the, what was his catchphrase?
Thank you. No,
Yeah,
you're welcome.
You're welcome. Just out of
welcome.
nowhere when it wasn't in context, because the thing was, they played it up like he had head trauma.
Oh, you're welcome.
Exactly. Then eventually, there came a point where Terry said it's either me or the mop, and he picked the mop. To which Terry sided with Raven. Raven kidnapped Moppy and threw it in a wood chipper.
Yep.
And after that, he got he eventually won the match with Raven and kind of reverted back to being Saturn, just regular Saturn, not goofy Saturn, but ended up tearing his ACL shortly thereafter that. And during when he got his ACL torn, as he was sitting at home, as happened a lot back then, he got released by the WWE.
Well, that happened to him with getting shot at the time too.
Well, that was after his release. That was about a year or two later.
Yeah.
But then he, after that, when he came back, he wrestled a couple appearances for TNA, did some indie stuff back when TNA was on weekly pay-per-view. It's still fledgling.
Oh yeah, I mean they've been out 10 years, but
he wrestled in a stable as I forget what they called him, but it was him, New Jack, Just Incredible, and Sandman, basically an ECW stable there. And then he just fell off the map. Well, come to find out, 9 years later, he got shot in his shoulder. After that, he became addicted to methamphetamines and was living on the streets.
Lost every dime.
Yeah. Basically went broke for the last 9 years. Now, recently, within the last 2 years, he's came back on the scene. And late last year, he did a return match. We talked about it on one of our earlier videos at a pay-per-view called AWA Night of the Legends. And it's something you can actually find on Netflix if you want to look it up. He doesn't wrestle the best match, but he doesn't wrestle the worst match on the card either.
No. And the thing is, I have to give the guy effort from coming back from all the adversity and the stuff he's put himself through. He seems like he's upbeat and he's wanting to make a serious comeback. If it does happen, it's all well for him.
It kind of reminds me of, if you guys are old enough to remember this, remember in '86 when they brought Superstar Billy Graham back and he did the vignettes when he was talking about the steroids and how they're bad for you and how he had to replace his hip because of steroids. It kind of reminds me of that a little bit. Not that this is a gimmick, but that was based off of fact too.
Oh yeah. And the thing is, Perry Saturn, what was your favorite match with him?
I think honestly the Saturn versus Raven where he
freed the Flock
match was one of my favorites. The dog collar match versus Y2J was really good. There was a lot of good ones. I liked him and Raven versus Benoit and Malenko. They had a nice little feud against each other.
I like the Eliminators versus, well, I already said the tag match, the cage match. They didn't come on the winning side of it, but just some of the spots he hit, they were great spots. They weren't too over the
top.
Exactly. And they, just both teams complemented each other so good with being such unstoppable forces. You didn't know which one was going to win.
Well, you had the hardcore brawlers versus the technical experts, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to put a couple links down in our comments where we normally put our links for our Facebook and our Twitter page. We're going to put links to Perry Saturn matches we think you guys should check out if you're not familiar with his work.
How about this? What would the Eliminators? You put them in a tag team match. Who'd be your dream match to see them against?
Well, I thought they wrestled really well against the Dudley Boys. I'd really like to see, weird as it might sound, the Eliminators versus the Rockers.
I was just thinking that myself because, like we were talking earlier, they were both set in their moves, but they didn't let that dictate their matches. Yeah. And that's what makes good tag wrestling. Or them versus the Hart Foundation wouldn't have been a bad one either.
That too. Or even there was a team that a lot of people really overlook. It's someone we probably should do at one point, the Orient Express.
One of my, with them and the Rockers, I remember their match at
Royal Rumble.
Yep.
88, I think it was.
That was 91.
91?
Or it might have been 90. But anyways, even if you want to put some comments down there, see some of your dream matches you wouldn't mind seeing them of having after you watch some of the matches.
Or even Perry Saturn by himself.
Exactly.
I think the guy was a tremendous worker in my opinion. He had a nice look to him. He had a decent build. He wasn't a small guy by any means. He didn't get quite as good of a push as he probably should have. Mm-hmm. He could have been a U.S. champion in WCW. He could have been a ECW world champion.
I'll say hell, towards the end of WCW, they could have given him the world title.
Yeah. They gave other people. They gave David Arquette the world title.
Well, even you look at Booker T. He wasn't no worse than Booker T.
He got over with the fans a lot, and that's why we do this show. Why we do these specials. We want to bring to attention someone that's been forgotten, basically.
Yeah.
basically all I have to say about Perry Saturn. Check out his AWE Night of Legends match on Netflix if you have it, or I think it's on YouTube as well if you look it up.
It is on YouTube. I saw it on there. Plus, he has a couple interviews on there too. You can probably check out too.
Yeah, he did one I seen with Tommy Dreamer just recently that was pretty good as well. But check him out. Check out all the stuff. You can look at it. Watch the videos we put down in the links. If you're not familiar with Perry Saturn, he's a tremendous worker. He's someone that I think they should bring back, even if it's just a trainer.
I think so too. I think, or a road agent, something like that. Just the guy deserves it. He put his time in the ring, and he was like I said, he was just an excellent worker. He was a good hand.
But basically, that's all we have for Under the Radar for Perry Saturn. If you like this, let us know. Put it in your comments. This is the second time we're doing it. We'd like to hear some feedback about what you think about it. If you got guys you want to see on here that you want to see us do, let us know and we'll do it. But anyway, basically we're getting a little long with this. I'm George Coles.
I'm Gary Rose.
And this has been Heel Heat.
Thank you very much.